You don't have to sell someone your movie idea or drive them crazy about everything you want to do in life and how they're going to help you. Just be low maintenance and impressive. That's it. Friendly.
Welcome to Global VID, a podcast about original TV and film productions and its international potential. I'm your host, Eric Y. Lapointe. Let's learn from each other and the experts within our field. Welcome to Global VID. We have changed studio locations into my kids' playroom. Back in December, we sat down with Bruce Hills, the president of Just for Laughs. Now, for full disclosure, I used to work at JFL and with Bruce, but I've been a lifelong fan of the brand and couldn't be happier to present to you this episode leading up to their 40th anniversary summer. Now, two important things to note is that unfortunately we had to cut out this segment on JFL Vancouver as the festival has been postponed due to Omicron concerns. And while we do talk about the Moon Tower Just for Laughs Comedy Festival coming up in Austin, Texas, the second piece of news is that since the recording, the company announced that they are expanding into yet another city in London, England. So for information on all of that, go to hahaha.com. And now let's roll the interview with Bruce Hills. Hello, Bruce Hills. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Oh, likewise. Very nice to see you. For those out there that do not know Bruce Hills, perhaps you could introduce yourself and what you do at Just for Laughs.
Sure, absolutely. I'm the president of Just for Laughs. I oversee all English-speaking activities, which is our festivals, both here in Canada, the US, and Australia, as well as our touring and media, which I'm assuming we're going to talk a little bit about all aspects of English production on the stand-up front.
How many content hours do you produce per year?
If you look at just the English business, it depends on the summer, but could be up to 100, about 50 hours, depending on who we are partnering with that given year. On the Franco side, quite a lot as well, because beyond stand-up, they produce a lot of different formats in Quebec.
So let's start with our first topic, which is your background and how you started in the entertainment space. Did you get started at JFL or did you take some first baby steps elsewhere?
Well, I always wanted to be in the business. I wasn't really sure why. I just felt it was something that it looked like could be some fun, but it also sort of fit the profile of who I was turning into. I was, promoting parties in high school and ticketing them and figuring out ways to get good bands to play for me and my friends in some way that made sense. So I sort of had a nose for it from day one. I was good at organizing things. If it was a ball hockey game around the neighborhood or, parties, then I started to meet people in the space, sort of struggling to figure out who I wanted to be later in life, and just thought maybe I should focus. And this is something I say to a lot of students I speak to, a lot of kids. I just saw a light. I said, you know what? I think I'm good at that. Why don't I just actually focus a bit of time and energy on it? So due to that, I ended up running into Andy Nallman, one of the key guys at Just for Laughs Festival here in Montreal and around the world in the early years. And he had a marketing company and he had clients that he didn't really want to service or have time to service. So he was very generous and said, hey, if you want to take on those clients, I'll give you 50% of the billing. Go for it. So I started off, taking a lot of clients that no one wanted, hamburger restaurants, beauty pageants, artists that couldn't sell any tickets, or the artists that were releasing an album that no one cared about, and tried to make some noise for them. And so it was a good eye opener. It was difficult. And then one day, Andy said that this festival that he's working for, I think at the time, maybe he was just consulting, but very early on, maybe the second year in English for Just for Laughs, we're having our 40th anniversary this July, said they were looking for drivers and that you never know what's the best route into a company. You should give it a shot. And believe it or not, for the entertainment business, it's well paid. So I went and interviewed for the job. The festival at that point was primarily a Francophone event, a French event that had a couple of shows in English and didn't really have any knowledge of who to hire. Knew that they couldn't send a unilingual Francophone to pick up a big Hollywood star or industry big shots. So they had to find a couple English guys to pick people up. So I did that for 2 summers, 1980 and 86, if I'm not mistaken, or 86 and 87. Anyway, a long time ago. And it was a great eye opener because not only did I pick up all of the VIPs, albeit there weren't many at the time, but hey, we had the executive producer of David Letterman. And I realized something very, very simple. 30 minutes from an airport is a long time to get to know someone. It's a long time. It's more than enough time to impress upon them who you are if you're smart and if you don't overplay the platform that you have. So, I ended up becoming friends with this gentleman. I ended up driving Jerry Lewis and his family and all kinds of characters, taught me a lot about, high maintenance artists. I mean, Jerry Lewis was a legendary artist, but difficult. I had to figure out a way to just drive him and not take anything personal and realize it wasn't about me. It was about getting this guy from point A to point B and get out of the way. He didn't want to meet me. I knew it and I just drove him. That's it.
Right. Yeah. And then were there some other stories that came out of that too?
Absolutely. The gentleman just trying to remember the name of the gentleman from the Letterman show. But at that point, he was the executive producer. The show was being shot at 30 Rock still. And he said, if you come to New York, give me a call. In those days, you couldn't text someone or, you had to basically, call them and hope someone would pick up the phone. So one day, knowing I was going to visit a friend in New York City, I called him. And I didn't get to him, but I got to his assistant and I explained to her the situation. I don't know if she 100% believed me, but about 15 minutes later, I get a call. And he says, wow, that's great. Come to the show. I'll give you a tour. So I'm in New York. I don't know anyone. I'm in the business for a minute. And I'm at the Letterman show, walking around with the executive producer, being introduced to Dave. He didn't really care to meet me either, but I knew that very quickly, but he was very professional. And I met everyone on the show. I sat and watched the show and he just said, hey, if you need anything, call me. So I just realized, oh, wow, what a high level way to build a Rolodex. And all I did was be polite in a car and be his contact for restaurants and how to get into shows because he didn't know. I was just the guy that he felt that he appreciated for 3 days he was in Montreal. And sometimes that's all you need to be. You don't have to sell someone your movie idea or drive them crazy about everything you want to do in life and how they're going to help you. Just be low maintenance and impressive. That's it. Friendly.
That's amazing advice. Everybody should listen to that. And now 2 years of driving and all this kind of life lessons. What was the next step after that?
Well, what happened is Just for Laughs, or at that point was really more Juste pour rire, and a little bit of Just for Laughs was really growing. The potential in English was significant. So they wanted to, staff up and address it. So going into 1988, I got hired as a publicist part-time to work with Andy Nolman. It was a teeny little staff. And that summer, I did a little bit of PR. As I mentioned, I got actually to work with John Candy for 2 or 3 days, which was a huge honor to get to talk about CFL football with him and, get a chance to meet a lovely man that was one of the biggest stars in the world at that point, and a star that really launched us by having him in the lineup.
Was that before he owned the Argonauts?
Was during.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, he wanted to talk about, I think he bought it with Bruce McCall and Gretzky, something like that. But anyway, all he wanted to do, he had much more interest in talking about the CFL than show business. So anyway, he was a very nice guy. And then coming out of that, I did a decent job. I really, I had a bit of PR experience, as I might have mentioned earlier, and working for Andy. So, I was okay at it. And Andy Nolman at the time was running everything in English and said, you know what, we have to hire someone to travel around looking for comedians. I don't really want to do it all the time. And I guess really more than anything, he didn't want to go to all these crappy little towns and grind it out. He was running the company as a whole and he wanted someone to do that. So I was happy to put my hand up and say, I'll do that. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a long time while I also addressed other jobs. Within that time, I took over as director of programming because you had to multitask, as I'm sure you remember.
Yep.
I also ran international television in the early 90s and led the sale of all our English content. So I learned the sales side of TV business, which was really, really interesting and a very good thing to learn about, because I realized very quickly, as you again know, Eric, that production deals with countries around the world were key to our financing and key to our exposure. And we needed someone that knew how to sell them with a touch that maybe just a pure sales agent would not have. So that was very helpful. And then, from that point on, Andy and I, and again, largely Andy was in charge. I was sort of assisting him. But by the mid-90s, I was playing a pretty significant role in all activities JFL. And in 2000, I took over when Andy went off to make his millions in the private
mobile space.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi there, this is Michelle Simone Miller from Mentors on the Mic podcast. Every week I share an interview with an incredible mentor in the entertainment industry. I focus on how they started and how they moved up to where they are today. People like showrunner and co-creator of Friends, Marta Kaufman, 5-time Emmy-winning producer and director Rob Burnett, who is the head writer of The Late Show with David Letterman at only 29 years old, to actor-director Tony Goldwyn from Scandal. We learn together how these incredible mentors started, their first job, and any advice they have along the way. Check out Mentors on the Mic wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to subscribe, comment, and share the Global VID podcast.
Okay, this is a perfect transition over to productions and getting those productions greenlit. I can't think of anybody else in Canada that's gotten more comedy productions greenlit than you. I might be wrong on that. There might be, I'm not talking about one show that's aired probably 500 times. I'm talking about numerous different specials, but also not only in Canada, as you mentioned, you've done it in the UK and quite recently you've done some new stuff also in Australia. But maybe take us through those first times when you were getting those original productions greenlit.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, the backbone of our television business is supported beautifully by the CBC and Bell. And luckily for us, they have agreed to coexist. And Bell is one of our owners, part owners. Both CBC and Bell have their own productions coming from JFL every summer and during the year, which is very, very important to us, not only to help finance our festival and festivals, because we have productions that even in Vancouver with the CBC and GEM, but also what has been key is our productions around the world. Before you had the ability to make a name for yourself online, you really had to grind it out, old school, which is TV deal one by one, territories didn't cross over, and, it took time. So in the early years, it was really about the UK and the US. They were the two most lucrative territories, the two most important territories in terms of the exposure we could receive. The artists that came from those countries were so important to our festivals. If you think about it, other than Canada, which is a huge producer of first-rate comedians, the UK and the US were the two biggest ones we had to sort of conquer. So we had a really good run. I mean, in the UK, we were the longest running stand-up show. I think we probably ended up still with that title, longest running stand-up show in British television history. We're on Channel 4 for over a decade. We shot some incredible stuff with every name you've ever heard of. Even Rowan Atkinson was hosting one of our shows. We had a good run there. We since went on to numerous other networks like the BBC and Comedy Central UK, et cetera, et cetera. In the US, that was also probably the number one priority for us, is when actually Andy Nallman signed up HBO with our agent at the time, Marty Klein at APA, and went to and brought John Candy. So John Candy in 1988, mentioned earlier, was there to host our live HBO show. So, you're a little festival doing a couple shows in Canada, and then all of a sudden, on a Saturday night at 10 p.m., John Candy walks out to welcome basically the US to JFL, and that put us on a different level. We stayed with HBO for a while. Then we went to Showtime, Fox. We've been numerous networks since over the years.
Yeah. So the reality is, like, JFL has always had that 50-50 component where it's like 50% television. I mean, this is just my imagination. I don't know if it's the actual revenues, but 50% TV production, 50% live events, right? And the two go hand in hand. One promotes the other, essentially. What was the milestone where you really saw JFL take off to the international festival that it is today?
There are a couple of things. First off, the HBO show in '88 was probably one of the key tipping points. The next thing I would say were the amount of deals being done out of the festival, not just people doing a deal with each other about a TV show or a this or a that, but talent being discovered. But the real tipping point was when we really established ourselves as the discovery place for talent worldwide, where you could come to the festival, like Dave Chappelle said recently, as a broke 19-year-old and leave basically on his way to being a millionaire. In the case of Tim Allen, Tim basically launched Home Improvement from our stages, and then when that got out there, you could find a teenage Dave Chappelle, you could see a veteran Tim Allen stand up, turn into the biggest star in comedy. At one point, Tim had the number one show, number one movie, and number one book in America, all coming from our stages. It became the Wild Wild West. You could show up with a funny 6 minutes and leave with $500K and a 6-month holding deal. So everything from people getting big checks that never materialized, that they still appreciated, to launching your career. There's Ray Romano was on our stage before Everyone Loves Raymond, Dennis Leary, Kevin James, you name it. Wanda Sykes, Margaret Cho. Margaret Cho came to our festival and left a sitcom star. That became the big piece of our business. That's what lured the industry to Montreal. When the industry wanted to come to Montreal, the talent agent and managers were way more willing to let us book their talent and have that talent on our TV shows. It helped us sell those TV shows to the world.
So is that when the brands of New Faces and Comedy Pro came about? And by the way, we should explain that to people who are listening, because they're probably not familiar with both of those brands.
So New Faces was our way to structure the discovery process, because before it was just you were funny and someone bumped into you in one of the primetime shows. God bless, there could be a deal. And that still happens at Just for Laughs. But then we decided that we felt that it was important to put on a show that really focused on giving new talent a chance to be seen and make sure everyone that mattered in the comedy space was in that room. So in other words, a very tough room to succeed in when it's filled with industry types. We learned a lot about that as we tried to make sure the quality of the comedy experience was good, as important as the caliber of industry folks in the room. You need to also give them a chance to succeed. New Faces has become and now has established itself as the premium comedy showcase in the world. There isn't any Tonight Show anymore with Johnny Carson, launching stand-ups. This is the chance now to be seen internationally in addition to Hollywood. It's absolutely key to the comedy industry to get onto New Faces. I would recommend watching Inside Jokes on Amazon Prime. That's a documentary series about comedians in the US all vying to be seen at JFL and trying to get the invitation to the event. That would give you an eye to that. We've expanded New Faces significantly. We have all kinds of different versions of it. We have a Canadian New Faces. We have all kinds of different ways to offer talent a chance to be discovered. So that's New Faces. When it comes to Comedy Pro was introduced over a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago. And what we realized that with all the industry coming to see talent and largely to discover talent, we could do more with them. We could offer them more opportunities to discover people, to hear about things, to educate themselves. We could offer opportunities to young industry folks to meet someone important that could have an impact on their career in a more formal environment, not just meeting them around the bar, which still happens today and happened a lot before we sort of formalized it. You could just, like I did, meet someone that could be career changing, driving a car. You could still do that. But now we organize it. And I think more and more coming out of the pandemic, which we hope to get out at some point, we'll make a lot of that available online. So, you can go to hahaha.com. Comedy Pro is very clearly listed there. I would recommend to anyone that's in the industry, not only to come to Montreal and see what we do, but also, if you can't make it, just to go online and watch some of the things that we do, because that's a very important piece for us, and a very, I think, still to a degree, a little bit of a secret. We'd like it to be less of a secret, but especially for Canadians that are looking for inexpensive way to meet up and to connect with people. We're not $2,000 to get entry to a 3-day event. We're pretty accessible.
Well, let me add that to that plug, because I feel like Comedy Pro is one of the best ways of meeting TV execs from Canada and in the US if you are a comedy producer. Obviously everybody knows of BAMF, which is more of a Canadian conference with lots of people from all over the world, and all sorts of content gets greenlit there. But if you're in the comedy world and you've got some money to spend to go to a market, to a traditional conference or TV market, Comedy Pro really has become that. And I remember just working for 3 years at Just for Laughs, I would take advantage of the Comedy Pro opportunity to basically meet with as many people as we could on who were working internationally, of course, which was my role back in the day.
Yeah.
Let's maybe talk about some recent productions that you have done. I just saw a number of stuff happening during the pandemic, so you didn't stop at all, which is great. I saw Roast Battle Canada, the format being brought to English Canada. How was that experience?
Well, look, first and foremost, when we realized in early 2020 or whatever, 3 months into 2020, that we were in this for likely the long haul, maybe not as long as it's turned into today, but we knew that the likelihood of making any show as it was planned, was not something that was going to happen unless there was a huge turnaround. We started to think about how we could deliver our talent up to the expectations of the broadcaster, up to the brand's expectations, and also in a way that the talent would be comfortable and safe, the production personnel and any audience member that we wanted to attend our show. We started to work on that. We realized that shooting in July, US and Canadian stars would have to get into the country, wasn't likely. So we reformatted everything. We reimagined everything. We shot nearly everything in 2020 in Toronto or around Toronto. We actually found a venue in Burlington, Ontario, that at the time seemed to be in a sort of COVID-free bubble. That didn't last forever, but it created an environment where we could shoot pretty well all the shows we needed to in the last 2 years in a manner that gave us, the type of quality production that broadcasters expect from us, in a way that was safe and, for everyone. And that was, I think, a very challenging piece, especially given that you never knew where the virus was going. You could be 1 minute ready to go and the next minute realizing you had to push again. And that meant calling up all the artists and telling them they had to move, and the production companies. So luckily we handled that quite well. Part of what came out of it was doing a deal for Roast Battle with Bell and Viacom. And again, Roast Battle was launched, funny enough, at Just for Laughs, was discovered at Just for Laughs about 5-6 years ago. So funny, it came all the way back to one of our productions. We shot season 1 in early 21. It went so well that Bell ordered season 2 without it airing. It just aired a little while ago. So we ended up shooting season 2 in the fall, delivering that as we speak. And that's been a great experience for us. I think the show has proven again that Canada's got some of the best talent out there. The show looks slick. It's done very well for Bell. They're happy. And hopefully we'll have many more seasons to come.
And I know from the last time that we spoke, Bruce, you also mentioned that you had to reimagine how even your international productions would work, including your brand new season with Network 10.
So as you will remember, we have a deal with a variety of networks over the years in Australia for the galas that are produced in Montreal. They're reformatted with an Australian host that comes to the festival and introduces the clips. That's been very successful for over 30 years, believe it or not, with different networks, primarily 10. But about 6-7 years ago, as we have a festival in Australia called Just for Laughs Sydney, we decided that there was an opportunity to make a TV show with primarily Australian talent, a little bit of Kiwi, a little bit of international talent that's visiting. And we shot that series at the Sydney Opera House, beautiful spot in the Sydney Harbor that is world renowned. It's done very well for us. But over the last couple of years during the pandemic, it's been very challenging to shoot and do anything in Australia. There are very, very strict ways to manage the pandemic. Even internally, it's hard to get talent from one state to another.
Wow.
So this year, knowing that we wanted to find a way to still make our show, we went and reformatted again. We said to the Australian, our partner, Andy McIntyre, and I, pitched that we would make the show with only Aussies, and that there were more than enough great talent in Australia to make the show. But we wanted to go to the state that had the most talent and the city that was the best for production outside of Sydney, and that was Melbourne. So we are shooting that series in January, coming up in a couple of weeks. The show's already on sale to the public. And for the first time, we're going to shoot 10 episodes in Melbourne before, hopefully, when everything gets back to normal, we'll bring it back to its normal home, the Sydney Opera House.
So there's going to be no talent coming from other states in Australia at all?
It might change, and we will be able to bring in talent from other states, but we needed to be in the state where most of the talent lived. In other words, why did we go to Ontario? We went to Ontario because the majority of Canadian comics lives in Toronto and around Toronto. So if we could make it easier and safer for them to participate in a production without getting on planes, in cars, hotels, we thought that was the smartest thing to do. So it's a similar thinking for Australia.
So no cars, so they had to bike.
Exactly. Yeah. The funny thing is that most of the talent in our Canadian productions basically Ubered, walked, biked to our show. So there's really only 2 touch points other than the venue. Get in safely to a car, arrive, go to a holding area 2 meters away from anyone else, and go on the production when you're called and only when you're called.
Right. All right. Let's move on and talk about JFL's multiple festivals around the world and your 40th anniversary coming up. So now we're kind of deviating away from TV, but I think it's so important because ultimately your festivals are the platform that allows you to do all these TV tapings. So please talk to me about your ambitions for JFL, the 40th anniversary. And I guess what might be in store from a hybrid standpoint, because obviously you guys have experimented a lot in the last couple of years and did a great job, by the way, this past summer.
Well, thank you. Well, listen, we did learn a lot and realized after we did so much online, we should have been doing it for a long time because it really had didn't cannibalize anything. It just basically broadened the brand's reach and hopefully, and introduced ourselves to some people who didn't know anything about us, especially American industry and comedy fans. Hopefully we'll turn into huge tourism in the future. At the very least, so many more people got introduced to the brand. So the 40th anniversary is a very important piece of business, and we hope to be back full capacity venues and with, famous Canadians and Americans being able to travel in without huge restrictions. That's the goal, and we're building that event. But at the same time, we'll have a lot of it available online to comedy fans and to the industry, with or without a pandemic factored in. So, really, quite honestly, the 40th will be an opportunity for us to not just celebrate the past, which we will do, but really put a lot of attention on how we're going to look different in the next 40. We've had 2 years of time to reflect and look at all the things we need to do to be better, to be relevant, to remain relevant. And, we'll announce a lot of those measures and a lot of those new shows and new approaches, even a bit of a rebranding that we're going to do all in the coming months.
Because what's great about 2021 is you ended up having stages in Montreal and potentially Toronto, I imagine, as well as New York City and LA. Is that something we'll likely continue to see post-pandemic as well? Because what a huge opportunity to be expanded beyond just one city.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I think that having stuff online is very, very important, as I've already mentioned, and you agree. Filming out of the other cities, I don't know. I mean, we want the new faces to be seen in Montreal. If they can't come to Montreal, the best idea was to put them up in LA where the industry lives. Most of them still watched it online because Of course, we had an outbreak of COVID at the exact time we wanted to shoot New Faces. So a lot of people were very cautious and watched it online, but it was a successful venture, and we got a lot of comics seen by the industry. Even got one person in particular booked on SNL. But with that in mind, we want the comedy industry in Montreal. I don't think, unless there's a major reason, that we will shoot during our dates in other cities. But I think what you'll see is so much more of the event will be available to comedy fans around the world from our stages in real time.
And now I saw an announcement this year with Moon Tower out of Austin, Texas.
Yeah, we partnered with a very, very impressive comedy festival in Austin, Texas called Moon Tower. They've been around for close to a decade, in a great city for comedy, and a great city to just take in anything, let alone comedy. We partnered with them to help them take the festival to the next level. They've been a 4-day, I would say, high caliber boutique comedy festival, and we want to take them to a 10-day event with bigger venues included, or arenas and larger outdoor spaces. They have a beautiful new amphitheater. We want to help them with sponsorship, because that's a piece that is very difficult and one that we're pretty good at, as well as the media production. Having a festival in the United States of America, it will be very advantageous for us, not only to make shows on stage, but also to give shows that we're working on a platform to be seen. We regularly put up new ideas in front of the industry in Montreal because it's on our turf and we can, but also believe that putting up shows in Austin, Texas to the industry will also be quite advantageous for us. And that's something we are planning to do, all run by the talented Spencer Griffin, who overlooks our TV development out of Los Angeles.
So it sounds like you've been super busy, and your team has done really a great job during this pandemic, not only continuing to produce content, continuing to produce the festival online, hybrid, however you can, and then now expanding into new markets like we just discussed with Austin, Texas. I think it's amazing. I really appreciate your time today, Bruce. It's been great. We'll talk very soon.
I look forward. Thank you, Eric.
And that concludes today's episode of Global VID. Thanks to our guest Bruce Hills of Just for Laughs. And as always, thanks to our editor Nicole Almeida and our theme song composers Amber Goodwin and Aaron Ross. See you next time.